'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in the hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. The children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads, and Mamma in her kerchief and I in my cap had just settled our brains for a long winter's nap. When out on the lawn there arose such a clatter, I sprang from my bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window I flew like a flash, tore open the shutters and threw up the sash. The moon on the breast of the new fallen snow gave a lustre of midday to objects below. When what to my wondering eyes did appear but a miniature sleigh and a tiny reindeer, with a little old driver so lively and quick, I knew in a moment he must be St. Nick. More rapid than eagles his courser they came, and he whistled and shouted and called them by name.
Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer and Vixen, on Comet, on Donner and Blitzen, to the top of the porch, to the top of the wall, now dash away, dash away, dash away all! As leaves that before the wild hurricane fly, when they meet with an obstacle mount up to the sky, so up to the housetop the coursers they flew, with the sleigh full of toys and St. Nicholas too. And then, in a twinkling, I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of each little hoof. As I drew in my head and was turning around, down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound. He was dressed all in fur from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and he looked like a peddler just opening his pack. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples, how merry. His cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the beard on his chin was as white as the snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke, it encircled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a round little belly that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him in spite of myself. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know I had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to work, and filled all the stockings, then turned with a jerk, and laying his finger aside of his nose, and giving a nod, up the chimney he rose. He sprang to his sleigh, to his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew like the down of a thistle. But I heard him exclaim, ere he drove out of sight, "Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night." Hello, and welcome to this Oak Tree English poetry live stream with a Christmas theme. That was, of course, A Visit from St. Nicholas by Clement Clark Moore, and something like that can only be followed with something else that is comical, but possibly not quite comical in the same way. We're going for A.A. Milne now. And the crown should lead you to conclude that, of course, I'm going to read King John's Christmas. King John was not a good man. He had his little ways, and sometimes no one spoke to him for days and days and days. And men who came across him when walking in the town gave him a supercilious stare, or passed with noses in the air. And bad King John stood dumbly there, blushing beneath his crown. King John was not a good man, and no good friends had he. He stayed in every afternoon, but no one came to tea. And round about December, the cards upon his shelf, which wished him lots of Christmas cheer and fortune in the coming year, were never from his near and dear, but only from himself. King John was not a good man, yet he had his hopes and fears that had given him no present now for years and years and years. But
every year at Christmas, while minstrels stood about, collecting tribute from the young for all the songs they might have sung, he stole away upstairs and hung a hopeful stocking out. King John was not a good man. He lived his life aloof. Alone he thought a message out while climbing on the roof. He wrote it down and propped it against the chimney stack.
To all and sundry, near and far, F. Christmas in particular,
And signed it not,
Johannes R.
but very humbly, Jack.
I want some crackers, and I want some candy. I think a box of chocolates would come in handy.
I don't mind oranges, I do like nuts, and I should like a pocket knife that really cuts. And oh, Father Christmas, if you love me at all, bring me a big red India rubber ball. King John was not a good man. He wrote this message out and gat him to his room again, descending by the spout. And all that night he lay there, a prey to hopes and fears. I think that's him a-coming now. Anxiety bedewed his brow. He'll bring one present anyhow, the first I had for years. Forget about the crackers and forget about the candy. I'm sure a box of chocolates would never come in handy. I don't like oranges. I don't want nuts. And I have got a pocket knife that almost cuts. But oh, Father Christmas, if you love me at all, bring me a big red India rubber ball. King John was not a good man. Next morning, when the sun rose up to tell a waiting world that Christmas had begun, and people seized their stockings and opened them with glee, and crackers, toys, and games appeared, and lips with sticky sweets were smeared, King John said grimly, "As I feared, nothing again for me. I did want crackers and I did want candy. I know a box of chocolates would come in handy. I do love oranges. I did want nuts. And oh, Father Christmas, if Father Christmas had loved me at all, he would have brought me a big red India rubber ball." King John stood at the window and frowned to see below the happy bands of boys and girls all playing in the snow. A while he stood there watching and envying them all, when through the window, big and red, there hurtled by his royal head and bounced and fell upon the bed an India rubber ball. And oh, Father Christmas, my blessings on you fall for bringing him a big red India rubber ball. Now, from where do we go? Where do we go from that? Well, let's go to Baltimore. I don't know anything about Baltimore really, other than the fact that the Silence of the Lambs was set there, or had a scene there or something. I don't know. Anyway, this is a comic poem, so I'm going to wear a comical hat. This is The Boy Who Laughed at Santa Claus by Ogden Nash. Now, this is it's a cautionary tale, so make sure you pay attention. In Baltimore, there lived a boy. He wasn't anybody's joy. Although his name was Jabez Dawes, his character was full of flaws. In school, he never led his classes. He hid old ladies' reading glasses. His mouth was open when he chewed, and elbows to the table glued. He stole the milk of hungry kittens and walked through doors marked no admittance. He said he acted thus because there wasn't any Santa Claus. Another trick that tickled Jabez was crying boo at little babies. He brushed his teeth, they said in town, sideways instead of up and down. Yet people pardoned every sin and viewed his antics with a grin, till they were told by Jabez Dawes, there isn't any Santa Claus. Deploring how he did behave, his parents swiftly sought their grave. They hurried through the portals pearly, and Jabez left the funeral early. Like whooping cough from child to child, he sped to spread the rumour wild. Sure as my name is Jabez Dawes, there isn't any Santa Claus. Slunk like a weasel or a martin through nursery and kindergarten, whispering low to every tot, there isn't any, no, there's not. The children wept all Christmas Eve, and Jabez chortled up his sleeve. No infant dared hang up his stocking for fear of Jabez's ribald mocking. He sprawled on his untidy bed, fresh malice dancing in his head, when presently, with scalp a-tingling, Jabez heard a distant jingling. He heard the crunch of sleigh and hoof, crisply alighting on the roof. What good to rise and bar the door? A sour of soot was on the floor. What was beheld by Jabez Dawes? The fireplace full of Santa Claus! Then Jabez fell upon his knees with cries of, don't! And pretty please! He howled, I don't know where you read it, but anyhow, I never said it.
Jabez,
replied the angry saint,
it isn't I, it's you that ain't.
Although there is a Santa Claus, there isn't any Jabez Dawes. Said Jabez then with impudent vim, oh yes there is, and I am him. Your magic don't scare me, it doesn't. And suddenly he found he wasn't. From grimy feet to grimy locks, Jabez became a jack-in-the-box, an ugly toy with springs unsprung, forever sticking out his tongue. The neighbours heard his mournful squeal. They searched for him, but not with zeal. No trace was found of Jabez Dawes, which led to thunderous applause, and people drank a loving cup and went and hung their stockings up. All you who sneer at Santa Claus, beware the fate of Jabez Dawes, the saucy boy who mocked the saint. Donner and Blitzen licked off his paint. In my household, we don't actually do Santa Claus. We don't do the whole Father Christmas thing. It's just not part of our tradition. We have something bigger and better than Santa Claus at Christmas time. But yes, it is quite depressing to see how embroiled in our society he has become. Now, he's of course based on a real saint, St. Nicholas, who at the Council of Nicaea was at the Council of Nicaea, and he punched Arius in the face. Arius, of course, who said that Jesus wasn't God. He was like the first Jehovah's Witness or something. So, yes, if you are a Jehovah's Witness watching this, beware of Santa Claus. He might punch you in the face. Just saying. Now, as I said, we have something bigger and better to think about at Christmas, and this is a poem about that. It's by John Betjeman. The bells of waiting Advent ring. The tortoise stove is lit again, and lamp oil light across the night has caught the streaks of winter rain in many a stained glass window sheen, from crimson lake to hooker's green. The holly in the windy hedge, and round the manor house the yew, will soon be stripped to deck the ledge, the altar, font, and arch and pew, so that the villagers can say, the church looks nice on Christmas Day. Provincial public houses blaze, corporation tramcars clang, on lighted tenements I gaze, where paper decorations hang, and bunting in the red town hall says, Merry Christmas to you all. And London shops on Christmas Eve are strung with silver bells and flowers, as hurrying clerks the city leave to pigeon-haunted classic towers, and marbled clouds go scudding by the many-steepled London sky. And girls in slacks remember dad, and oafish louts remember mum, and sleepless children's hearts are glad, and Christmas morning bells say, come, even to the shining ones who dwell safe in the Dorchester Hotel. And is it true? And is it true? This most tremendous tale of all, seen in a stained glass window's hue, a baby in an ox's stall, the maker of the stars and sea, become a child on earth for me? And is it true? For if it is, no loving fingers tying strings around those tissued fripperies, the sweet and silly Christmas things, bath salts and inexpensive scent, and hideous tie so kindly meant. No love that in a family dwells, no caroling in frosty airs, nor all the steeple-shaking bells can with this single truth compare, that God was man in Palestine and lives today in bread and wine. From John Betjeman, we turn to a much less known and much less talented poet, a chap called M.R. Rennicks, who is my pen name. This is one I wrote many years ago, Your Will or Mine. Back in the beginning, when the world was still new and the stars were just learning to shine, Eve trusted the serpent instead of the Lord and said, not your will, but mine. Adam was with her and ate the same fruit, thus cursing the rest of his line. And dressing in fig leaves, he stood before God and said, not your will, but mine. All throughout history the serpent has hissed, and man took his lies every time. And laughing he looked his God in the face and said, not your will, but mine. God loves his creation so very much, he has always forgiven our crime. He gave us a way to pay for our pride. Still we say, not your will, but mine. Even good King David, that ruler of old, in a moment of pride thought it fine to ignore God's commandments and marital vows, and said, not your will, but mine. Then, 1,000 years on, in David's old town, a young lass of David's own line changed the words round and accepted her God and said, not my will, but thine. Laid in a manger that first Christmas day was the newborn King of mankind, all because Mary and her hubby Joe lived not by their will, but thine. That baby grew up and lived a full, perfect life with no hint of a sin or a crime. But the world that he'd made hated his light and said, not your will, but mine. Then in the garden, where he was betrayed by one who had shared bread and wine, our Lord sweated blood as he prayed for our sake, not by my will, but thine. Beaten and punished, pierced and hanged for sins not his own, but mine. The same Christmas baby died there on the cross, embodying not my will, but thine. We all know the ending, the glorious truth that 3 days later in time, he rose again, defeating the grave, calling, let your will be mine. The offer is open. The present is here, wrapped and waiting this Christmas time. The only question you must ask yourself, shall I live by God's will or mine? Thank you very much for joining me on this this Christmas edition of the Oak Tree English Poetry live stream. I hope you've enjoyed it, and feel free to like the video, to subscribe, to share it around, to click the little bell to tell you when I'm next doing a live stream. It's lovely to have so many people watching me, I think each video gets about 20 views ish. So it's really good that you're watching my videos. It makes me feel really warm and fuzzy inside. So share them around if you think they're any good, and just don't tell me otherwise, so that I can keep making them in blissful ignorance. I think this is probably going to be my last one of the year, unless I get a chance to do some New Year ones, because time is what it is. So I wish you all a very, very Merry Christmas and the happiest of New Years. Goodbye and God bless.